Releasing isn't my favourite bit. It's you letting your baby go. And making it is, that's great, the whole creative process. Releasing it's a bit more difficult. You've got to sort of think about promoting it and doing this, that and the other, and it's not necessarily what you got into it for. And also then you're letting it go and people have all these opinions that you don't necessarily agree with. Someone just said to me the other day, one of these tracks, this is about this, so-and-so, isn't it? I went, no. It's like, oh dear, this is going to start happening now. But I've enjoyed making the album, and the idea of releasing it is great because people will get it. My people will get it, but all the chat that goes on outside it, that's not my favourite bit. Yeah, it's the strangest thing. Even with the Beatles, you thought, okay, we've made a big album, let's say like Revolver or something. So now we know how to make albums. This is going to be easy. You go back and make the next one, and you go, how do we do this? And you've really got to get up to speed again and stuff. And I always used to play the last album just to see where we were up to, It is different every time. And it's, I just realize every time, I don't know how to do this, but I'm glad. I wouldn't want to know how to do it, And this time, the challenge was to do something good. I actually said to myself, I'm going to make a good album. And normally you say, I hope I'll make a good one, or I'd like to make a good one. I just actually really put my foot in it this time to myself and said, I'm going to make a really good album. Because I knew there was some prospect of me going out on tour. And I thought, I'm going to go out with a really good album that I'm very pleased with. So I met up with Nigel and he agreed that's sort of what he wanted to do as well. So we set about it. You always do, and I don't want to know. That's the nice thing about it. I actually don't want to know, because that's what makes it always fascinating, to just have nothing. You'd be sitting here, pick up your guitar, and then after an hour or two, you've got a song. And some people, if it works, some people are going to go, I love that one, or whatever, and it's like, wow, yes. It's like baking a great cake or something, I've no idea where it comes from. Yeah, it comes from my love of music. I think that's the starting point. I was talking to Keith Richards not so long ago, and he was saying, we started off listening to music. None of this writing it and singing it. So all we used to do is listen to it. And he's very right, then we started playing it and singing it and then eventually writing it. But I think it comes from this love of listening to what you think is great music. So it just gets a beautiful sort of feeling going in you. Everyone who loves music, feels that feeling, and that's what's special about it. And it's kind of mystical. Why do these combinations of vibrations, why do they affect us so much? How can they really affect our emotions? I mean, I can't hear God Only Knows without welling up. It's just one of those songs for me. It's just so special, and it's something to do with the words, it's something to do with the chord changes, something to do with the record, and but it's mystical, So I love that. I really love that about what I do. And when people say, "Why do you still do it, man? Aren't you jaded? Aren't you fed up?" I go, no. Sometimes I wish I was. I could go on holiday. But I love it. I really love it. I'm really looking forward to going on tour, America. Because then you get the feedback from your audience, as well as all this stuff. But yeah, no, I don't know how it happens. I don't know how it works. And I think a lot of people, if you talk to them about how they make their music, there's a kind of mystical element in it. Which I think is great. I mean, how lucky to be in a job where there's that kind of an element, rather than just boring, very mundane. And I do feel it's hugely lucky, It has changed, yeah. I listen to old records and my voice is different. But the funny thing is, when I come to do some of those old songs live, I still do them in the same key. I mean, when I did Live 8, someone said, just Helter Skelter still in the same key? I said, yeah. I have a very sort of innocent way of thinking about singing, because a lot of people don't and will talk about ways to sing and from your diaphragm, it must. I think I kind of do that naturally. I think the diaphragm bit. So I think that is true. But I have a very sort of simple view of singing. It's like, just do it. Don't think about it too much, and just sort of. So I just get on with it, and it's always been like that. I remember recording. I think it was Kansas City with the Beatles, and I was. I'm gonna. Because it's like it's. You've got to get out of this person who's talking quite sensibly, and you've got to go well. And you've got to like go somewhere, you know. And I always used to say, it comes out the top of your head, you know. And we're talking to John about it. So we talk. He said, "What is that, man?" I said, "I don't know. It just comes out the top of my head." And I remember I was having trouble with it. Kansas City, and I couldn't let go, you know. And he came down in Abbey Road and he sort of said, "Comes out the top of your head, right?" So, "Thank you." Well, and then did that. So that's all I know. Sort of, it's stupid stuff like that comes out the top of your head, which I'm sure isn't true. But you know, that's enough for me. And I went up to my old school, which is now a Performing Arts Centre in Liverpool, LIPA, school I have a lot to do with, and I was helping some of the kids there, some of the songwriting kids, and we were in the vocal room, and they had a big chart up there showing what goes on here, like larynx, and all the names for it. And I said, I think you better get that down. I said, because if I knew all of that went on in there, there's so much to go wrong. I mean, I just think of this just like a tube, and it goes out the top of your head, you know. So what was the original question about? Does my voice change? Yeah, I think so. Just with maturity, I think it must change. But the stuff's still in the same key, and I still think the same way about doing it. You sort of just get up and you just do it. And it's you know, it's stood me in good stead many a year. We started off, basically we recorded the album in Nigel's favourite studios, really, because I'm not a sound guy, I'm just the other side of the mic. So it's important for him to be listening in conditions he's either used to or happy with. So I said, well, where do you want to work, kind of thing? And he said, well, Rack in London, the old Mickey Mouse studio. I said, well, that's great, I've worked there, I like that. And then Ocean Way in Los Angeles, which is a big favourite studio of his that I hadn't worked in. But he said, oh, it's a great room, and I really love the sound in the room. Something magic happens in that room. So I said, fair enough, you know. Great excuse to go to LA. So, and then here, Lyndhurst, Air Studios. Again, I have worked here. But it really was... the reason was because they're studios that Nigel likes, and as he's the sound man, I bow to that. It was stop and start. At Rack, I just wanted to do a couple of weeks to see if we got on, me and Nigel, because, you know, we might not have got on, and after a couple of weeks, it was like, okay, pull the plug. I don't want to do this. But in fact, it went the other way. I really enjoyed working with him, and we put together a couple of nice little tracks that are still on the album. So, but then we had some time off, and while we each considered when we might do the next bit, and then I think we did a month, and then had some more time off, did another month, had some more time off. So I think it was over the period of a couple of years, but I'm not sure, probably all in all, it's maybe 4 or 5 months, the whole process, but over a long period of time. I had been listening to various things. A friend of mine, Nitin Sawhney, who I like his stuff, and I've been to a few concerts, and I listened to a bit of his stuff. And I sent that to Nigel and sort of said, you know, maybe this is a sort of little direction I'd like to play around in. And he promptly said, no, I don't think so. So I went, oh, all right. He said, no, he said, I want it to be you. He said, you know, forget everyone else. You know, I don't want it to be you. He said, that's what I think people want to hear. He said, like, let's just concentrate on what you do and get it right. I'd been listening to a couple of other people, and they were pointers, but it wasn't their music. I mean, for instance, something like Nat King Cole, where his voice is just so there. So a couple of things like that we might have talked about, and just have the voice really there. You know, if you're going to buy someone's record, I like to be able to hear them. You know, really hear every little syllable. And luckily that's the way Nigel wanted to go. But yeah, Nitin, I sent him Nitin, but he said, no, that's Nitin, that's great, lovely stuff, but we don't want to go there. It's got to be you. Now, I listen to stuff all the time, but it's not necessarily with a view to informing what I'm going to do. Some of it does, you just can't help it, If I was listening to people like Neil Young and stuff, then I might be thinking, oh yeah, I'd like to do an acoustic track. But that's as far as it goes, really. I don't think I want it to be Canadian and Neilish, it would just be a vague ballpark or something. But I listen to a lot of stuff, but it's all so varied that you couldn't make an album with that as your influence. Yeah, I didn't know who would produce the album, but I knew I wanted the very best. And I wasn't sure who that was. So I thought, well, I'd like George Martin, really, but he doesn't produce anymore. His son Giles does, and George kind of oversees projects, but he doesn't produce. But I rang him, and I said, I'm thinking of doing a new album, I've got some songs together. Who would you recommend? Who do you think's sort of the best person around? And he got back to me a week or so later, and he said, well, I've had a talk with Giles and a few people, and the name seems to be coming up is Nigel Godrich. And I knew Radiohead stuff, and I liked particularly the sounds on it, and I think it's a great sound he gets, so that's very important for me. And Travis, I knew he'd done that album, the Invisible Band album, and so I liked what he did, and I say particularly the sound. So we met up, and just to see if we had the same kind of thing in mind, and he did, and I think he really went a bit further than I did, in as much as he said, I want it to be a great album as well, but we've got to focus on you. So I've been thinking about it, I've been talking to people, and what would you want in a Paul McCartney album? You'd want it to sound like him, and a good one, sort of that. So yeah, but it all came through George. Basically, it was quite similar, really, except the key thing, I think, was when I started to do the album, the 2 weeks in RAC, I came in and I said to him, I'd like to work with my live band, because they're my guys, and the last tour we've been talking about, can't wait to get into the next batch of songs, new album. Nigel said, he said, I've been thinking about that. He said, I'd like to take you out of your safety zone. He said, that's your safety zone, you know these guys, and you know what you do with them, and he said, I'd like to kind of get you out of that zone. So it turned out that basically meant that he'd like me to have a go at drumming, for instance, whereas Abe, my drummer, is a much better drummer than I am. But Nigel wanted this sort of English feel, this sort of, which I've got. Now, I'm not a great drummer, but I've got a feel, so I hear, I enjoy drumming, but it's the feel that I've got. So he said, I want to try that, he said, try it. So we just tried it on one of the tracks that we'd made with the band, and he said, this is what this is what I'm looking for. So gradually, I had to really, very embarrassing, I had to say to the guys, look, he wants to go in this other direction, and he's the producer, so I can't really say no, you've got to work with my band. I said, how do you feel about it? And they were really cool. They just said, look, whatever it takes to make a good record. We're coming out on tour, we'll be playing it, but whatever it takes to make it, you go and make it, so that's what we did. And that I think was the big difference that Nigel brought to it, to how, I might have done it with the band, I think. But it did make quite a bit of difference. It's changed the feel of the album, and did mean I was out of my safety zone a bit. It was like, oh God, I've got to play drums. Oh God, I've got to do this. I've got to think it all up instead of just, hey, will you do that bit? So it did make it. It was a lot more work for me, But I think I think he was right to do that. I think so. It's that was the thing. I brought in some songs, and Nigel would just sort of say, well, I don't really like that. And, it was like, I thought, well, had it been another situation, I might have got away with that. Like, well, I'm going to do it. Simple as that. But with him, it was like, well, why don't you like it? He said, well, look, that sounds a bit corny. You've done better than that. And it was really quite cool, And there was none of this sort of yes man bit, which is very easy in my position. People can sort of say, well, you're the one who knows. But if you're working with a good producer, he'll say, as Nigel did, I'm not really keen on that song. Let's not do that one. So he'd knock out those songs. And then other things, he said, I like the opening line. And I said, look, okay. And we nearly came to, it got a bit fraught because I got a bit fed up with this. I said, look, tell me what you don't like. Don't just say you don't like it. Get very specific. Let's go down the lyrics. And he said, well, all right, well, I like that opening line. I said, okay, tick. He said, well, I don't like those next. That's boring. I said, okay, cross. We did that, went all the way down. I said, what kind of thing do you look? He said, well, it's boring. It's been said before. Okay. And, so we had a couple of moments. Probably the best moment, stroke worst moment, was I was sitting down to do a bass piece, stick bass on a track. And I was feeling great. I was ready. Okay, let's go. And just before I sat down, got the sound, got everything, I knew roughly what I was going to do on the part. And then Nigel, with the greatest timing ever, says, that song we were doing the other day? He said, I think it's crap. I went, oh yeah. Okay, fine. Anyway, it's just getting on with the bass. But of course I'm going, plungerino. And I'm going, okay, dum, 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 dum. What do you mean you don't like it? What do you mean? I don't really like it. It's crap. I said, well, you know what, Nigel? That was not the greatest timing. I was just about, you could have waited till I'd done the thing. And it was one of them, I lost it. And I didn't get angry, but I just lost all confidence. I just sort of thought, the song was crap, was it? Great. And I'm like, he said, I didn't think you'd take it like that. Didn't think it'd affect you. I said, well, think again, because it did. And we had that was our moment, pivotal moment on the album. And I said, okay, fair enough. Next day, right, let's get that bass. Came in, nailed it, somewhat angrily. And but when we started putting it back together, and I said, look, that was really bad timing. I said, I'm used to George Martin, the ultimate diplomat. Paul, do you think, perhaps? I said, will you? No, I don't think so. Well, can we give it a try? And we possibly might just say, George is that, fabulous. And so I think Nigel learned a lot of stuff. We both learned on the album. And then we put the whole thing back together. Now we knew where we stood. And it was like, okay, if you don't like it, just tell me. But not just before I'm going to do a take. And let's be very specific. What don't you like? So we did that with all the stuff. And there was one song that we totally remade. It was a song that was called Riding to Vanity Fair. That's on the album. And we went through it. He said, I don't like that. Don't like the melody. Don't like da. So I just got in the studio and said, right, okay, how about this? Oh, much better. So we kind of rewrote the whole thing. And it wasn't going to make it to the album. And it has now. And a lot of people are kind of, noticing that track. So what he did was definitely right. But, caused a couple of tense moments along the way. But it was good we did it. I'm much more pleased with the track than when I brought it in. It was just the opening line. There's a fine line between recklessness and courage. You'll see some people just go, wah, and really think that's the way you do it. And sometimes it is just foolish and just reckless. But they think they're being courageous. So that thought really was what started me off, and I just kind of followed on from that idea that you've got to choose which of the two you're going to do, be reckless or courageous. And so that was lyrically based on that. And then I just sat down at the piano and started the kind of chuggy thing, keeping it very simple. And then the little hook, fine line, it's a fine line, came. So I brought it into the studio in Los Angeles, and I was working it out. And on that little bit, there's a little riff that goes around the fine line bit. And when I was playing that, I made a mistake. and I went to a wrong bass note, and Nigel go, "That's great, that's it." I went, "Oh no, well, it's actually a wrong note." He said, "No, check it out, so listen to it. Ooh, I want to see what it means." It just didn't go where you expected it. It was supposed to be like an F sharp, and it went to an F. And so that became a really interesting little thing then. It was like, okay, that's good. That's got a little signature originality to it. So that and the words and the tune, then we just put that all together. It's something I've done for a long time, but sort of recently I've started to notice more, perhaps, like how some people talk, what phrases they use. And I've got a couple of sort of older, posh English friends who, instead of saying, "That's very nice of you," or, "Thanks a lot," where I come from, they might say, "How kind of you." And, so I just started with that phrase and this whole idea, how kind of you to think of me when I was out of sorts, instead of, "Thanks very much for thinking of me when I wasn't feeling too good," which is just an ordinary way of saying it. I just like this slightly sort of elegant language. So I was just imagining it from the point of view of somebody like that. So writing a thank you letter, "How kind of you to think of me. It was very nice of you to so and so and so and so." It wasn't particularly about anything, but just playing with that language thing, and then trying to put the tune a bit more sort of rock and roll pop to set it against it. So it kind of wrote itself, that one, coming off the phrase, "How kind of you." It did develop in the studio. That was one that I brought in as a kind of, I can't remember what key it's in, but it was like, "How kind of you to think of me when I was out of sorts." There was that kind of thing. But then what we did was just did a sort of a drone, and it was like a harmonium sort of. "How kind of you to think of me." Just put it in like a limbo land, like an Indian piece. "When I was out of sorts." So that changed its sort of nature, put like a harmonium sort of thing in there with it. So it became like a sort of Indian consonant, and then this sort of pop song sort of sitting on the top of it. And then we brought in some drums about halfway and bass on a kind of 60s kind of vibe. Always remind me of sort of The Doors or somebody, sort of it's a funny little, it's a kind of little 2-beat thing on the drums. But that changed quite a bit in the studio. With Jenny Wren, it's one of those things, I love to play acoustic guitar. So I've done things like Blackbird, Mother Nature's Son, Calico Skies more recently. Just because I love playing acoustic guitar. It's just a nice thing. Me and millions of other people love to do that. And I was in Los Angeles, and I was in one of those moods. I want to go and play my guitar in the great outdoors. So I went into a spot in one of the canyons there, lovely nature spot, getting away from all the traffic and everything, and just found a little spot and sort of sat down and started playing guitar. And so when you get Blackbird, it's a kind of 2-part thing, Blackbird. Instead of just a strumming thing, it's a little picking thing. So it's like that kind of thing. You've got the 2 notes. So I was trying to do something similar. So this was like. So it's always got the 2. It's got a bass line and this little melody. And when I got to there, it was cool because that sort of should have gone in major, because it's all been in the major till there. But I found that was like really nice. And the cool thing about it was, as I did it, there's another note comes up, that little note, that it just comes out by mistake. dun dun. So I just got a bit fascinated. Okay, wait a minute. Like most other girls, Jenny Wren could sing, but a broken heart took her song away. Boom, 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 boom. So it's just that kind of genre, you know, that I love, and I just had a lot of fun. Wrote the basis of it there, outdoors in the canyon, lovely day. Went back home that night to where I was staying, and just sat around while dinner was getting made, and just sat around with the girls and just sang it and made it up. You know, it was. It isn't anyone. It's like a lot of my things, you know. It's just a made-up thing. But it's funny, actually. I was talking to someone yesterday, and talking about how much I loved Dickens, and I read a lot of Dickens, and just talking about it for some other reason. And this person said, Jenny Wren, our mutual friend, which is his character in the Dickens book, Our Mutual Friend. And she is a really cool little girl who's sort of magical and who sees the good in things. And I think subconsciously that reminded me that's where I got it from, I think. But to me, it was just something to do with blackbird, a wren. A wren is one of my favorite birds, little English bird. It's the smallest English bird. And I always feel very privileged to see a wren, you know, like it, just because they're very shy. So it's like, so a combination of all of that, you know, it's a favorite bird for me. And then instead of making it a bird, again, like blackbird, only more definitely this time, I made it a woman, you know, a girl. So it was good fun doing it. At the Mercy was one that I wrote on a day off in Los Angeles. Sometimes when you get into recording an album, you start to sort of get a feel of what you and the producer are sort of going for, and what kind of a new song might fit with what you've already recorded. So this one was just made up, I think, like on the Sunday when I was having the weekend off. We'd worked all week, so on the Sunday I just sort of thought, I'd like to take this in tomorrow, you know, and have a completely new thing that he hadn't heard, I hadn't heard, and it was just very, very fresh. So I was just messing around on the piano, and I just got a couple of chords I liked, slightly darker chords than I might normally have, and this phrase just kept coming. You know, a lot of people do this when they're writing. They just let anything happen. So it can be, you know, scrambled eggs, baby's legs, man of fire, and you just suddenly go, man of fire. I can go on, that could be a direction, you know. And with me, it just came at the mercy. At the mercy of what? What are you doing? At the mercy of a busy road. At the mercy of a busy road. And I didn't really attach any significance to it, but one of the things I like about my songs when I've written them is you can attach very specific significances to them. I was talking to Heather about that particular one. She said, whoa, for me, at the mercy of a busy road, whether she lost a leg in an accident, you know, that's very appropriate. So that's the kind of thing. I was thinking of that. You know, how life can throw you a curved ball, and suddenly you're going along, and then suddenly, wham, you know, oh no. And in a similar sense to Maxwell's Silver Hammer, only that was like a comedy, dark, black comedy, based on that idea of you never know what's around the corner kind of thing. So At the Mercy was that, yeah. And I took it in the next day to Nigel. So I said, what do you think of this? You know, he said, oh, great. It became his favourite, you know. So we worked on it, and that was it. But it was basically that. It was really just finding a couple of chords that were kind of dark enough to get this sort of message of life can throw you curveballs, and what do we do about it? Well, I don't know, just keep on resolute, whatever you do. funny thing about some songs is when you're writing them, you can think you're someone else. I mean, when I was doing Long and Winding Road, I thought I was Ray Charles. The long and winding road that leads to your door. In actual fact, my record of it, Beatles record of it, is nothing like Ray Charles at all. But in my mind, I was being him. I was playing Ray in my mind. And on Friends to Go, I realised I was playing George Harrison. So to me, it just started to sound like a George Harrison song. So I was kind of writing it with that in the back of my mind. So it was like, I've been waiting on the other side for your friends to leave so I don't have to hide. I regret they didn't know. That whole sequence. I could see George doing it. I've been waiting on the other side for your friends to go. So that was it. Now I was just sat down to write, and I say, the sort of feeling of George came over me, and I kept writing, thinking, George could have written this. So it was nice. It was nice, a friendly song to write, and I just kept imagining I was just over, sort of, by some sort of housing estate where these people lived in a sort of block of flats, and I was like over the other side over here, and sort of bit just watching them, sort of waiting for them to go, so I could go in. I don't know why. Don't know. The psychiatrist should probably again have a whale of a time with that one. It's the lyrics sort of say very twee, very me, and I think it is very me. That stuff, The Beatles made a sort of Englishy kind of music once they got past their American roots, American influences. A lot of our early stuff was just some of the guy now and pure soul R&B stuff that we loved. Twist and Shout is directly taken from America. But then we started to sort of work in little things that were more us, and that kind of thing, that's particularly me, that kind of English tea type thing. And again, it was this fascination with sort of how people speak, how some English people speak. But the idea started, I was on holiday, and if you want a cup of tea, you don't do what you do in English. A cup of tea, please. They always say, what kind of tea? Like in England, nobody ever said, what kind? Well, they actually would these days. But in the old days, it was never like, what kind of tea? It'd be like, what do you mean? Cup of tea? So now they say, what kind of tea? And you have to sort of say, English breakfast tea. And then they go, oh, okay, and you get it. They get an ordinary cup of tea. So I just thought, it's amazing that, calling it English tea. And I thought it's quite original, really, because nobody calls it. We don't call it that. So I just started playing with that idea of English tea. And then I say, there's one particular older English person I'm thinking of who, instead of saying, do you want a cup of tea? They might say, would you care for a cup of tea? It's just the way they say it. And I love that. Would you care? And in this case, would you care to sit with me for a cup of English tea? And so I really went to town on that whole fruity way of talking, that whole sort of fruity language that I like. I think it's very endearing, very English. And I even managed to work in the word peradventure, which I was very proud of. Because that's like, I think because I read Dickens quite a bit, it came to me like from, what? There is a word, peradventure. And I think I probably read it in Dickens. You get all these old usages of words there. And I thought, I do hope I'm right, because I put it in the song. Do you know the game croquet? Peradventure we might play. I thought, I hope this is right. I looked it up in the dictionary. Peradventure, perhaps, maybe, yes. So I thought, oh, great. I'm sure there's not many people work that one into a song. And then also, do you know the game croquet? Peradventure we might play. Very gay, hip hooray. In the sort of old sense of the word gay. So it's a very sort of. So it was nice. It was doing that. Croquet, very English. Lawns, hollyhocks, roses. Very Alice in Wonderland too. That was also the back of my mind, which influenced a lot of me and John's writing. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, that's Alice to us, you know. Picture yourself. You know, the whole idea of picture yourself in a boat on a river. It's very Alice, it's very Lewis Carroll. So it's just the sort of way I like to write that. A fruity little song. The actual inspiration of Too Much Rain is Charlie Chaplin's song Smile, which he wrote. Not many people know he wrote it, because, you know, you just think of him as a comedian. But I was always amazed to hear he'd written that. You mean, you know, beautiful song. Good old Charlie wrote it. I think it was for a film, Modern Times or something, was it? And it's a great song. And the idea of smile, even though your heart is breaking. Smile when your heart is breaking. That is it's a nick. It's a direct pinch from that. So there's laugh when your eyes are burning, and smile when you're doing this, and sigh when you're doing it. So it was really that. It was hints for feeling horrible. You know, when you're really down, this song could get you up. You know, just remind you that, you know, as the Smile song does, to just sort of, you know, push through it, feel good, because it'll be all right. So that was that. And I think also, you know, I think in some way, I know I was thinking of my Mrs. Heather, who's had a lot of sort of rough times in her life. And the chorus sort of says, it's not right in one life, too much rain. So that was that kind of inspiration. And you know, I'm never that specific. I wouldn't sort of say that's exactly what it's about. It then widens out, and it's for everyone who's had just too much in their lives, you know, to cope with. And that applies to an awful lot of people. But that was it. It was really just a sort of a helpful song. Certain Softness is just a straightforward love song, to me. I like things like Brazilian music. I like that sort of rhythmic, Latin-y kind of thing. I think it's very sexy, very romantic. And I was actually on a holiday where I do a lot of writing, because it's where I've got a lot of time. You know, it's me, I go on holiday to work, but I don't think of it like work. It's more, you know, I just enjoy sitting around. And I was in Greece, actually, on a boat trip. And this sort of Latin-y moment all came upon me. I just found some nice chords, and this idea of a certain softness in her eyes, and certain sadness haunts me. It's just all the sort of love songs I've ever heard, and the ones I love, because I love a lot of old-fashioned stuff. It's just so well crafted. You know, I have a lot of influences from before my time, before my dad's time, even. You know, people like Fred Astaire, people like that. I really listen to and love the craft behind it all. So all that sometimes just all floods in and becomes a new song, if I'm lucky. And that was one of them. I like very much the way we recorded it, which was very simple. It was just me playing guitar, and we just decided to have a go at it. And I remember that this was in LA, and the bongo player, Joey, was just sitting on the floor, and the guitar player was sort of just sitting there, and I had a guitar. So it was just two guitars and the bongos. So it was very informal, but we just got a good little take on it, you know. And so then we built it up from there. It's got a very intimate sound on the record. I like particularly the sound of that record. Vanity Fair I originally had as quite a sort of up-tempo thing. I had it as quite it's like I think it's like that. It's like oh, that's it. Yeah, that's it. It was like I bit my tongue. Where did he get me? Where did he get me? I bit my tongue. It's all very staccato and kind of fast, and came in one evening when things had just laid back a bit, and it was more like sort of said, okay, let's just like I bit my tongue. We sort of swamped it right out. Just did it, took it right down, which changed the mood completely. But this was particularly the one that Nigel didn't like. That I bit my tongue. I did. It was all these little short phrases. So he encouraged me to try and go somewhere else. So I ended up keeping the first line, which was what he liked. So it was like I bit my tongue. I never talk too much. I do wrong. And got those were much more sort of smooth, those next couple lines. And knocked out the where did it get me? Where did it get me? Just knocked that out. Kept the kind of meaning about, you're approaching someone for friendship and they're just kind of, they don't want to know. They're just rejecting you. And it's not about any particular person. It's about anybody who's like that, which I think we all meet in life. You're in a sort of great mood and somebody, well, I bit my tongue. I didn't talk too much, And it's one of those songs where you get your own back on those people by writing a song about them. And, whoever it applies to, people who are just generally a bit sort of, yuck. And so that was it, yeah. And we'd done the backing track, but we didn't like the basic song. We liked the track. It was all nice and dark and quite moody. Nigel had messed around with some sort of echoey things, and it got kind of quite spooky. But so I reworked it right here, in the studio, and just kept working at it till we liked all the words and all the tune. And finally, I said, okay, wait a minute, this is an okay song now, because it was getting blown off the album. It wasn't going to be on. And by the time we'd finished working with it, it was like, oh, okay, we like this one now. And it made its way back onto the album. So it was worth all that work. Follow Me was one of those songs that kind of almost wrote itself. Sometimes you're feeling sort of great about your life. Not always, but if you're lucky, you're feeling great. And I actually had done something where I'd sung Let It Be, and I was thinking, it's kind of nice having a song like that because it's kind of quasi-religious, but it's very uplifting, There will be an answer, let it be and stuff, It's in C, a very sort of open key, When I find myself, times of trouble. So I was sort of messing around in that region. I'm thinking of the same sort of thing, what is it? It's just somebody very important in your life, or is it spirit of goodness, or whatever it is, something kind of great. So it was just like, you lift up my spirits, you shine on my soul. Whenever I'm empty, you make me feel whole. I can rely on you to guide me through any situation. Hold up the sign that reads, follow me. Hey, come on, boys, everybody in. I was one, it just kind of wrote itself once you got there, it's like, you do this for me, you're great, you give me direction. It just inspired. It started as a piano thing, I just wanted to, it's a little two-part piano thing. This sort of right hand is doing the melody a bit, and then the bass it's got a definite part instead of just vamping away. So it was just like a little mathematical problem, trying to work out how I could do this. And I just started singing this and gave my promise to you, girl. I don't want to take it back. And then it kind of went like a Motown thing for me. Started to go like I could hear tambourines and, I'd hear the Motown guys, the Funk Brothers, putting a backing track to that. You and me, side by side, we know how to save the world. Actually, originally it was that wasn't. It was like slightly less positive. So I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't. We know how to save the world. So anyway, it just developed. Went through that little Motown-y thing. That is why I gave my promise to you, girl. second verse, diddly-da. And then I had this other little bit that is on the front of it. Looking through the backyard of my life, time to sweep the fallen leaves away. Gave my promise to you, girl. And then that ends it as well. So it's like really two little songs put together. And then when we came to do it in the studio, it was multi-layered because it was just me. So I think I started off with the piano and then sort of put a bit of bass on it, put a bit of drums on it. And then Nigel started encouraging me to sort of play some guitar licks and things. So that was quite complicated. A lot of little bits. But I think it sounds like a band in the end, you know. Yeah, that was This Never Happened Before is a straight love song. And, you know, I'm a lover, not a fighter, as they say. I think that's, you know, such an important thing in the world. And it gets spoken of and sung about a lot. But I, you know, like silly love songs, you know, that the message of that song, you know, what's wrong with that? I love that. I love to do that. It's just... So this one was really exactly that. It kind of wrote itself a bit, you know, just... I'm very sure this never happened to me before. The chords it's always a big help if you get a nice little chord sequence, and the opening chords to the verse of that go a nice place. So they settle you down with your melody and you feel like you're sort of going somewhere. So that was what was happening, and wrote it and recorded it. One of our very first things we did at RAC with Nigel, that was one of the sort of things to see if we could get it on. And I thought, oh, you know, this is good, we're going to go somewhere with this. That and Follow Me were really the first two that Nigel and I did together. And nice little story about it was I was in America and I was actually getting a massage, and I happened to play it, and the girl who was doing the massage said, oh, I love that song, you know, I love that song. And she happened to tell me she was getting married. So very quietly, I just sort of sent her a few weeks later. She told me when she was getting married and, you know, where it would be. So I got her number off her, sent her a little letter saying, look, you know, if you love it that much, why don't you play this at your wedding, you know, so and so. So I said, but this is highly bootleggable. I said, so just play it and send it me back. You can't keep it, but I said, I'll send you the proper record when we're done with it. And it was great. It was really lovely. So they did do that, and they got married too. It was like their first dance. It was very highly romantic stuff, this. And but it was very nice, because she just wrote in the letter, wrote all thanks and all that, and told me about the wedding and about her husband. But she just put this one little line. She said, you know, we had a great time. We laughed, we cried. You know, and I thought, well, that sums up that song for me, you know. Anyway. Yeah, it started off as the "If you love me," the little verse thing. Won't you call me? It was just about, if you love me, will you call me? And then, and it was going quite straightforward. And for some reason, I was getting this feeling. Again, you know, why do you get these feelings? I don't know. But I was getting this feeling as if it was sort of the deep south of America, like Charleston, Savannah. Something about the chords, I think. There's just something reminding you, almost sort of Randy Newman kind of thing that I thought I was doing. It always ends out nothing like him. But, you know, at the time, I think I'm sort of doing this thing. So that was going on. And then I got these other chords that sort of happened halfway through the verse, which were really, you know, so really started to kind of inspire me then. Only love is strong enough to take it on the chin. And that started to move it into a slightly other area, which then led up to this, anyway, you can make that call. So then it was written, and took it, recorded it in Los Angeles, and then got our string arranger out there. We used two string people. One's David Campbell, happens to be Beck's dad, or Beck happens to be his son. And we used a guy, Joby Talbot, over here, who's very good too. He's our English guy. And took it to David. and we did a little string arrangement on it, and so that kind of sewed it all up, and it's a ballad, anyway. We'd done a lot of the album, we'd almost finished, and we just thought, how about opening the album with just something for nothing? Not like a song, let's just open it with like a little jam thing, a noise, just something to get your attention, then we'll go into the first song. So I said, okay, great. And I always like that, where you sort of throw away the rule book and you go, okay, let's just do something completely different. It's not a song, it's not a thing, and we just go and play a bit. And Nigel said, why don't you just have a couple of ideas for songs, and we'll make them. Just don't need to be long, but we'll just see which one works, kind of thing. So he said, you just go and do two things, while you're doing one, do two. So I thought, okay, I'll do three, just to show him. So I came out here, and the piano was set up here, and just sort of started doing the first little vibe, second little vibe. And I said, okay, I've got a couple of ideas here. And he said, yeah, that'll do. So I recorded the piano bit first. Just really nothing, just in your face, sticking your tongue out. And we were joking. It was like as if the grown-ups had gone away. They'd left us the studio. It was like, okay, come on then. And I just got on the drum kit, just thrashed that out. And we recorded in a space of like about 10 minutes. Well, maybe an hour. But, and we just did all three of them. And in the end, instead of choosing one of them for the beginning, we stuck three of them all together and put them at the end. Well, you're always looking for a title when you've finished an album. The Beatles album, Abbey Road, was going to be called Everest, and suddenly it didn't seem like a very good idea, and we come up with the idea, hey, Abbey Road, and once you got it, you sort of figure. So I was looking around once we'd finished the album, and Promise to You Girl says, looking through the backyard of my life. So I thought, backyard, that might be kind of good for an album, just backyard. Rang Nigel up, I said, what do you think about that, backyard? He said, it's okay, he said, it's just not very intriguing. So it's kind of catchy and all this. It's just not very intriguing. Why? What's it mean? Well, okay. So I rang him back, I think, the next day, and I'd had a thought of maybe then calling it, looking in the lyrics, and so in Fine Line it says there's a long way between chaos and creation. So I thought, okay, maybe Chaos and Creation could be a good title. But it sounded a little bit too monumental. Chaos and Creation, the Book of Ecclesiastes. It was a little bit too sort of posh. So then I thought, In the Backyard, and that kind of stuck the sort of, and that's from Promise to You Girl. So I just stuck those two little quotes together, and that kind of put the tongue in cheek. It stopped it being too sort of, pretentious. So, and then we were talking about it, and he texted me back. He said, he said, great, it fits. He said, because that's sort of what this album's been about. Chaos, creation, and it's also homemade. It's a bit in their backyard, So he said, well, that'll do it then. We just text, yes, I love it. Yes, it fits, yes. And all that, and so that was it. For making this record, I've got a record I like, and that's what I set out to do. I wanted to be able to have a record that I wanted to play, and then if other people liked it, that was a bonus. So yeah, I've got a record that I like. I never really think about what I want people to get from a record, because that's very difficult. You start to want them to give you things they're not going to give you. So a long time ago, I just learned, make it something that I like, and then people put their own interpretations on it, and that's fine by me. But as long as I like it, that's the main thing. And I like this one.